On today's show, Eric visits the Palace of Versailles to find out about Marie Antoinette, who famously said, "Let them eat cake." Or did she? From a royal queen to a royal cake, it's the king's cake. And keeping with the theme of royalty, a cake that Carême used to create using the leftover royal icing, the matches cake.
I'm going to be following in the footsteps of my food hero, Antonin Carême. He was born just after Marie Antoinette came to the throne. He cooked for Napoleon, the Tsar of Russia, and the Prince Regent. Not only was he part of an extraordinary chapter in history, he created much of the food I loved during my childhood in France.
We associate the French with always having a sophisticated cuisine that they jealously guard. But the France of Carême's childhood in Paris was very different. He was born in 1783, right at the beginning of the 10 most tumultuous years in French history that were to culminate in revolution. Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI were on the throne here at the Palace of Versailles, built of course by the Sun King, Louis XIV, some 100 years before. Marie Antoinette was brought over from Austria to create a marriage of political convenience that was supposed to lead France to the promised land.
What an amazing place to walk down the aisle.
Terrifying, because she was a teenager. I mean, she was only 14 years old. So you can imagine her in her huge stiff dress, getting married in this awe-inspiring space to a man she'd really barely ever seen.
The marriage wasn't a happy one. In fact, it took them 7 years to consummate it.
The Queen of France, as her primary duty, it was to produce an heir to the throne here in this bed. And Louis just wasn't able to.
Anything to do with food?
Unfortunately, it was. The French royal family, by this stage, were all really quite fat. And Louis he was very greedy, had a huge appetite, and he particularly loved pastries.
That's good for me.
Good news for you,
I've been there.
bad news for Marie Antoinette, because he gorged himself on pastries. He was always complaining of having indigestion.
Louis banqueted every day, and often in public, as eating rich, fine food was a symbol of power and status.
I mean, I wish I could go back in town and see a party. I mean, what it would have been like?
Well, oddly enough, not really very much fun. Certainly not for Marie Antoinette, because she was obliged to have her dinner in public. It was a ceremony called Le Grand Couvert, and she and Louis would be seated side by side. So if you imagine the Marie Antoinette and Louis sitting here in the middle of a crowd, and it would have been a very hot, smelly, noisy crowd. The poor Queen's trying to eat her dinner. Oh, look what Marie Antoinette's having. Oh, look what the Comtesse de Provence.
So it was like a zoo, really, feeding at the time of the zoo.
Completely. I mean, even the poor Dauphin, everybody said that he was so greedy that he looked like a monkey in a zoo when he ate. But it was a zoo in every sense of the word.
Yeah, I think I changed my mind, to be honest. Maybe I won't go back in town at all.
But by the 1790s, these public banquets were not ingratiating the royal family to their subjects.
There were a deep division between the rich and the poor. And as the aristocracy here in Versailles gorged themselves, the grain harvest had failed. The poor were starving and the mob was rioting.
On hearing that her subjects were starving, Marie Antoinette was supposed to have said, "Let them eat cake." Well, a cake that predates the revolution and survived it is the king's cake.
Since medieval time, the 12th night has always been a big celebration in France, and they always celebrated with a cake, actually called the king's cakes. It's been the same recipe for years and years, and still today, huge celebration all over France at this time of the year in January. So the ingredients for our recipe is based around puff pastry on a rich almond cream perfumed with dark rum. Place the ground almonds, sugar, butter, and eggs in a bowl. Whisk thoroughly. So you can see as soon as you add the eggs, you get a very nice, glossy, smooth cream. So we're just going to add a few tablespoons of dark rum. Just give a nice flavor to it and smell as well. Okay, so that's nice and smooth. So what we're going to do now, we're going to roll the pastries. There we go. And remember, when you roll the puff pastry, don't push it down, just roll it gently. So it's quite interesting to see how that recipe survived all these years. It even survived the revolutions. You can imagine any word with the word king inside wasn't very popular. So what they did, instead to lose the recipe, they just changed the name and they call it the tarte de l'égalité, meaning the equality cakes.
Place a ring on your pastry and pour half an inch of the almond mix.
If you put too much, there's a big chance it's going to leak.
So next stage is to seal your cake. Egg wash the edges of the base layer.
I'm just going to brush it slightly on the edge of my pastry here.
Then cover with another sheet of pastry and gently push the two sheets together. Once this is done, you are ready to turn this simple pastry into the king of French cakes.
And this is the traditional shape, really, you will see everywhere on the 6th of January, all over France. It's not a good time to be a pastry chef, because you just come out of a very busy Christmas, very busy New Year, and you're straight on in a galette des rois, it's massive. Right, so now we're just gonna do the pretty bit. I'm gonna egg wash the top of our pie, just to give a nice golden color. That's the traditional way to decorate it, is with a very sharp knife. You cut halfway through the pastry. You don't want it to do a hole in a pastry, because again, the cream will come out from it. So you start from the center, and you just mark it. And just go all around. So this is now going to go to a hot oven, 180 degrees. It needs to take at least 15 minutes, up to 1 hour to cook nicely. Keep an eye on it, but we want it nice and golden brown. There we go, you can see how much is rise. So the final touch, to give it a good shine, I got some sugar syrup here. It's always a pleasure to pull out something like this out of the oven, you know, nice and risen. Quite a success, really, we have to say. A recipe who survived the revolution, la galette des rois.